everyone, Irina here. This is my little channel on Norse culture and Germanic languages and interesting bits on history and culture in general. And because this is a time of making promises for the upcoming year, which we might or might not respect, I thought about telling you a little story from a Norse source about one such oath or vow taken by a hero who is confronted with his own fate that he needs to fulfill following the existence of this vow. So our hero is called Helgi. If you read Norse literature, you are bound to come across him at some point. In the collection of poetry known as the Poetic Edda, from the 13th century, but the sources are much older than this. You're going to find 3 poems about him. So the first one is called Helga Kviða Hjörvarðssonar, and the other 2 are called Helga Kviða Hundingspanna, 1 and 2. So these 3 poems are about this hero who appears to be in some kind of connection with perhaps a more famous hero, the hero Sigurd, known as Siegfried in the Germanic tradition. The origin, authorship, dating, and alterations to these texts are a matter of debate. There is no clear answer regarding any of these questions. What we can say is, however, that he appears to be the son of King Halfdan, at least in the Danish tradition. So if you read Saxo Grammaticus, who speaks of him, and if you look at the naming of places, you're also going to find a lot of them named after this hero. So he appears to be famed for having defeated characters such as Hunding and Hotbrod during some naval expeditions. And I suspect that such stories originating from the south might have traveled to Norway and then to the islands, so to Iceland respectively. And as they traveled, they have been modified in the course of time with new features being added. And one of these features, probably the most important one, is the love story with Sigrun, who appears to be a Valkyrie. The element of him being the victorious hero over this Hunding character has also been retained. So, in other words, you have a lot of material being fashioned and refashioned, especially in the poems about him being the defeater of Hunding, so Helga Kviða Hundingspanna. Now, how he got involved with the cycle of the Volsungs, I remind you the Volsung cycle is the correspondent of the Nibelungen cycle from the Germanic continent. If you want more information about that, I linked something in the description. How he got involved with this more famous cycle is, again, somewhat difficult to say. Both stories, like I said before, circulated from the south, so I suspect that as they've been circulated, they might have been involved one with the other. And at no time was there the connection so close as to the actual episodes of the stories concerned here. All right, so the relationship between Helgi and Sigurd, these 2 big great heroes, grand heroes of Norse literature, is established by the statement that Helgi is the son of Sigmund, who also appears to be the son of Sigurd. However, Helgi does not really appear in any of the poems dealing with the Volsungs, with this legendary heroic family. And in the Volsunga saga itself, we have a story in chapters 8 and 9, but it does not affect the main narrative overall. As well as in the Helgi lays, Helgi appears here to be the son of Sigmund and Borghild, but Sigurd, on the other hand, is the son of Sigmund and Hjordis. Complicating everything is the presence of a 3rd son of Sigmund, this time with his sister, Signy, by the name of Sinfjotli. We do have a resemblance between the relationship, for example, between Sigurd and Brynhild, the Valkyrie Brynhild, and his own Valkyrie Sigrun. but this is something we rather find out from the prose notes. There isn't really anything in the verse which can help us identify this character as a Valkyrie. Um, yeah. So anyway, in the poem, in the first poem, the Helga Kviða Hjörvarssonar, this relationship with the cycle of the Volsung seems to be a little more distant. However, we do have the same traditional figure involved in some naval campaign, but there is no accurate connection with this Volsung cycle, and moreover, his wife is not Sigrun, but Svova. This poem is in a pretty bad shape, as it seems to have been composed out of fragments stemming from different poems, at least two poems, and we can split it into a few main themes. So, for example, between stanzas 1 and 5, we have a dialogue of a bird with Atli, who is a servant of Helgi's father Hjörvarður, and this discussion revolves around his father winning the future mother of Helgi, Sigurlin. Then we have a dialogue between Helgi and this Valkyrie, mentioned as identified as Svova in the prose notes. And then we have some other stanzas up to 30, where again Atli has an argument with the giantess, so it's a little bit at bay from anything else going on in the poem. And perhaps the most exciting part is stanzas between stanzas 31 and 43, where we find out about the death of Helgi after the unfortunate oath of his brother. And this is actually the point I was trying to make, so I'm sorry if I bored you too much with this whole discussion about the context, but I thought it's also relevant for us to better understand the story. So I'm just going to mention that everything in this poem, except for the third section, stems from the second half of the 10th century, most probably, and we have a lot of prose. Yeah, so most verses we find in this poem are just parts of dialogue, so they're quite hard to figure out. So whoever composed wrote down this poem in a later time in the medieval period was definitely trying to bring this whole chaotic mess into some kind of unity. Therefore, we have this high amount of narrative. So yeah, we can guess that probably the tradition of this hero Helgi spread, it became so interwoven with the tradition of the Volsung cycle that poems were composed to reflect this whole variety of stories, or this whole diverse forms of stories that evolved with the passage of time. So what do we find out in this story? There is an interesting oath here that might be indicative of the great importance there was given in the Viking Age to performing an oath and to respecting an oath, because nowadays we perform oaths, promises, let's not say oaths, but we do that not under the pain of death, for example. So nobody's going to die if you promise to yourself that you're going to learn 2 more foreign languages or lose 20 pounds next year. But in these literary sources, at least, this is taken very seriously. So an oath is like a binding contract, morally binding, and I would even say magically binding contract. And this hero Helgi acknowledges his fate, and he does so as to fulfill it, because he knows that an oath has this power of leading people into a certain direction, whether they like it or not. So we find out in the prologue, or it's not actually a prologue, it's a prose introduction before this 4th section of the poem. We find out that King Helgi was a mighty warrior, and he comes to King Eylimi and seeks the hand of his daughter Svava. They exchange vows and they love each other greatly. And then there is at some point a Yule celebration. So it's a sacred ceremony where people perform oaths while drinking. Um, and his brother, so Helgi's brother Hedin, is coming home alone from the forest, and on his way home he meets a witch or a troll woman. She rides on a wolf and has snakes instead of a bridle. And she asks Hedin for his company, which he declines, and she threatens him that he would pay for having declined. Um, and yes, so during the evening, these vows are performed. There is also a sacred boar being brought, and they lay their hands on the sacred boar and they toast. So, like I said before, this is binding. Um, Interestingly, um, the brother of Helgi, Hedin, vows that he would have Svava, his wife, as his own. And he initially doesn't realize it because he appears to have been cursed by this troll woman he met before. But then, after Helgi asks him about, what news do you bring from Norway, Hedin becomes overwhelmed with sorrow because he realizes that he had committed an evil deed. Helgi, however, does not react all that negative to this news that his own brother vowed to conquer his wife. On the contrary, he says that he wouldn't be sad, he wouldn't succumb to sorrow because he has a duel coming up on an island, and if fate proves to be unwilling to leave him, to let him live afterwards, it would not be the worst idea for his brother to take care of his wife. He's actually pretty sure of his death because he also mentions the fact that he had foreseen his doom due to the fact that his following spirits, known as Fylgjur, the part of the soul in Norse literature, these spirits had met Hedin when he saw this troll woman riding on the wolf. So you see, everything kind of comes together. Helgi knows he is going to die, and there is somehow this feeling that his death is at a very proper moment, and it is almost in connection or induced by this vow that Hedin performed earlier. So in the next stanzas, he mentions the fact that he goes to this duel with someone called Olf, the son of Hrothmar, and he receives a mortal wound. Afterwards, he sends his emissary companion by the name of Sigurd to go to Svava and let her know of the happenings. He says that your husband died at a place called Frekkastein, the crag of the wolf, in the morning, and then he proceeds with praising him for the noble king that he was. Svava afterwards has a short conversation, apparently with a dying Helgi, although some of these stanzas might have pertained to Hedin rather than Helgi. himself. So let me quote you a little bit from stanza 40, for example. So here it is Helgi apparently who is speaking, and he says the following to her. Heilve svova hulk skal deila, sjömuni heimi hinstr fundervessa, thea butlungi blöða undir, hovum kjör komið, hjarta et naista. So hail to thee, Svova, thy sorrow rule, our meeting last in life is this. Hard the wounds of the hero bleed, and close to my heart the sword has come. This is from an older translation, so don't be surprised if it sounds a little more archaic. All right, and this is what Helgi says, and afterwards I think Hedin is more logical to have this line. Biditik svova, brúður grottatu, ef vil mínu móli hlýða, að þú hefni hvílu, gjörvir og jófur ungan ostur leiðir. I bid thee, Svova, weep not, bride, if thou wilt hearken to these my words, the bet for Hedin have thou ready, and yield thy love to the hero young. Yeah, maybe I should have used another translation, but out of temporal reasons, I chose this one I had at hand. All right, so afterwards, Svova says that it was not her will for the warrior to die, but she also accepts it, and then Hedin mentions that he would be going now to win fame, to acquire some victories of his own, and even to avenge his brother. Interestingly, this whole story ends with the author mentioning in a prose note that Helgi and Svova are said to be born again, which is a nice trick if you have multiple poems with the same characters, but they all die in them. So yeah, trying to make some kind of connection between them. All right, so this was my story for today, my example of an oath, and the utter importance of abiding to it and of respecting it, because there was no other way. An oath was something which had to do with your fate that also needed to be fulfilled. So my message to you, careful what you wish for next year. If you enjoy these videos, I gladly welcome you to follow me on my channel and maybe even on my Facebook page. And if you decide to support me so that I could provide more quality content to you, please also consider becoming my patron. Happy New Year, all the best to you.